Charles County, and what I like about the federal tax plan is it involves giving less of our money to government. And if you look around right now, there's a couple things I want to point out. One, everybody you can hear my voice right now, everybody in the state of Missouri and around the United States are paying more in income taxes and other taxes than they ever have before. And not just income taxes, sales taxes, property taxes, insurance taxes, inheritance taxes. You're giving more to government than you ever have before. And yet, if I were to ask you how many people here feel like they're getting more out of government than they ever have before, not a whole lot of hands would probably grow up. In fact, that's the message that we heard back on November 8th, is that we're tired of having more and more government that produces and serves less and less of the people it's trying to bring these services to. That's why tax cuts are important. I'm thrilled with the effort to reduce our federal tax burden, because certainly in Washington, D.C., my confidence level that our tax dollars are being used efficiency is not very high. But we can also do things here at the state level, which is why I am thrilled, as Tim mentioned, I'm thrilled to announce that on December 1st, I'm going to be announcing and pre-filing the most comprehensive piece of tax reform legislation in the state of Missouri that we've seen in a generation. This tax reform bill will represent almost $1 billion in tax cuts right here in Missouri, right where we live, right where we're growing our businesses. For the small business owners, like the Pogue family, Arrowhead Building Supply, it will reduce their tax rates by 20%. 20%. If you're a low earner, if you're a working class family, there's great news for you, because according to my new tax plan, we're going to eliminate the bottom 4 tax brackets of our tax code completely. Because tax codes, thank you. Tax cuts are not just a benefit for one particular group, for one set of citizens, for one set of people. Tax cuts are the mechanism that allows states like Missouri to compete with states like Texas, like Tennessee. And by the way, where do you think all the population growth statewide is happening? It's happening in states that don't have an income tax. And if we're successful getting my plan through, only one of our bordering states will have a lower income tax burden than the state of Missouri. So I'm very excited to be the leader, to be the champion for tax reform, major tax reform here in Missouri. Certainly I'm looking forward to partnering with the federal government, and any progress they can make is a step in the right direction. So again, I want to thank everybody for being here, because this will affect us all, and I appreciate your support. Let's get tax cuts now. Thank you very much.
Okay, I know you're all turning into popsicles, but believe it or not, we're actually on time. So we're going to keep rolling right along. As Senator Eigel pointed out, the federal government does not have a revenue problem. They're taking in more revenue than ever in our nation's history by far. They have a spending problem, and they have a priorities problem. And so these folks you're hearing from, they've got their priorities straight. I'm going to bring up 2 of my former colleagues from the Missouri House, Representative Nick Schroer and Representative Paul Kurtman. There's a lot of other elected officials here as well, and I think it's important you know they're here, because they're taking time out to support this effort as well, because you got such great support here. County Executive Steve Ellman, I think he may have just left. He was here. He was pointed out earlier. I got some other colleagues here, Representative John Weeman and Derek Grier and Dean Plocker, all from the Missouri House. If you give them all a big hand, they're here because they support this effort as well. And the guy who traveled the furthest, Representative Dan Stacy from Kansas City, is here. Thank you, Dan. Mayor Lynn Pagano is here. Mr. Mayor, there he is back there. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Any other elected officials I left out? Okay, thank you all for coming very much. These 2 gentlemen were pivotal in bringing us to where we are here today. Representative Nick Schroer not only serves all of you in the Missouri House, he is general counsel for the Arrowhead Building Supply family of companies. And when I needed a location and help immediately, we found out we were going to do this a couple weeks ago as the bus was coming back across the country. And I called Nick right away, and he jumped on it immediately and has been here all throughout with Rick Pogue. Nick is a freshman representative, but he is steeped already in wisdom. He's got some great plans as well for the future for all of you here in the state of Missouri. So without further ado, we'll hear from Representative Nick Schroer.
So I had some thoughts that I was going to share with you, 2 pages worth. but with the cold, I'm going to shorten that down quite a bit. As Tim mentioned, I am Nick Schroer. I serve as General Counsel for VGI, which owns Arrowhead Building Supply and Discovery Design. And I'm very grateful that all you job creators could come out today and share your thoughts and share your time with us on this very important issue of tax cuts now. The simple common sense idea of tax reform wasn't always a partisan idea. When you look back and you look at the tax reforms of JFK, a Democrat who, by today's standards, would not be a Democrat, but this was not a situation, wasn't a platform that D.C. Democrats used to be against. The common sense idea of letting us keep more of our own money and doing with that money what we know is best for our families, for our businesses, is very common sense. And that's why I applaud the Job Creators Network for coming here today, bringing their tax cuts now tour, bypassing St. Louis City and coming here in St. Charles County, the fastest growing county in the state of Missouri. As Tim also alluded to, I've got a bunch of my friends here today, small business owners, taking time away from their businesses, taking time away from their families, as other state representatives are here with us. Most interesting to me is that tax reform and tax cuts from the JFK era, from the Ronald Reagan era, Bush tax cuts, they work. And to see this plain and simple from the numbers, 31 years ago today, I wasn't even a year old. I would have turned a year old that December, but it just shows you the conservative youth that we have in the state of Missouri, the conservative youth that is pushing forward common sense ideas, common sense conservative ideas like tax cuts. But 31 years ago today, that was when we had a president that was pushing forward the most comprehensive tax cut plan that this nation had ever seen. At the beginning of President Reagan's presidency, there were about 90.9 million jobs, and this is according to the Department of Labor and Statistics. But when he left, there were 106.9 million jobs. When Reagan left in 1989, he had slashed our incredibly high tax rate of 70% in 1981 to 28% in 1989. The government's budget numbers show that tax receipts had expanded during this tax cut time from $517 billion in 1980s, when we were getting taxed out the wazoo, to $909 billion in 1988, close to 75% change. So, to me, this Laffer curve, when tax rates get too high, they penalize and deter work and investment. This has been shown to lead to revenue losses for the government. And, you know, to me, when you're deterring a certain activity, when you're putting taxation on something to deter a certain activity, like the Democrats do with increases on cigarette taxes or the carbon taxes, they're trying to deter a certain type of activity. So why can't that same approach, in their mind, be linked to why people don't want to save, why people don't want to work? When tax cuts occur, unemployment drops. When tax cuts occur, revenues increase. And with our country headed in the right direction, once again, we the people have responded. The unemployment is at record lows. The stock market is at record highs. So I think now is the time to act. We have to get these tax cuts, like Newt Gingrich stated, we have to get these things done before Thanksgiving, because the country that has responded just to the mere idea of tax cuts, they want it now. And I think it's time that we, Missourians, send a message clear to Congress that Missouri wants tax cuts, and they want it now. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Schroer. Hey, very good friend of mine up here next. Before I bring him up, he reminds me every time I'm standing next to him. Paul Kurtman is a Marine. Do we have any other veterans in the audience? Thank you for your service. Thank you so much. Thank you for your service and for continuing to serve your country by being here today. Representative Paul Kurtman, Marine, a guy who reminded us of how cool the Constitution was before everybody started talking about it. He even wrote a book about the Constitution. Paul Kurtman has been at the forefront of reminding the government that it works for the people and not the other way around. He's been at the tip of the spear in standing for reducing the regulatory burden. And as Representative Schroer just pointed out, the very fact that President Trump has been slashing the regulatory burden, the very fact he's been talking about tax cuts, has resulted in the highest stock market ever, the lowest unemployment ever, Wages are rising for the first time in over a decade. The failed economic policies of the last administration have really been spotlighted with the successful policies that we've just seen in the last 10 months. If we can get significant tax cuts for all Americans, the sky is the limit. And a guy who's going to reach even higher, he just announced his candidacy to be our next Missouri State Auditor after serving 8 wonderful years in the Missouri House and standing up for you, wants to continue that fight. Joins us here now, Representative Paul Curtman.
It's great to be here, and it's great to be here for such a wonderful cause. In Jefferson City, I'm the chairman of the Committee on Ways and Means. What that means is any bills dealing with taxes, revenue, has to come through my committee. And you know what would be really good for our elected officials in Washington, D.C. to do? Spend a little time in their state capitals, in the committees where we're dealing with tax policy, because you know who's testifying on the bills that we're hearing in Jefferson City? People like you, moms and dads, business owners. And I will tell you that to a bill on every piece of legislation that has come through Jefferson City dealing with tax policy, the people who have constantly made the trip 3, 4, 5 hours to come testify in favor of bills to cut taxes has not been the super wealthy. It's been the people who have the most to gain because they're living paycheck to paycheck as they struggle to feed their family or as they struggle to grow their business. And it's because they understand something that a lot of politicians and a lot of bureaucrats often forget. Money operates an awful lot like food. The more we have to send to the federal government in the form of fees and costs associated with red tape, the more that we have to send in taxes every April, the bigger, the stronger, the more intrusive our government grows. But the more money that we are allowed to spend in our local economies or keep in our banks or our savings accounts or on hand for loans for businesses, the bigger, stronger, more robust and vibrant our local economy can be. And you know who the politicians are who are serious about this because they are also serious about cutting spending. Back in the early 1990s, the U.S. Congress passed a law called the Congressional Review Act. The Congressional Review Act requires Congress to vote on bureaucratic regulations if those bureaucratic regulations would cost the American economy $100 million. In 2015, bureaucracies and bureaucrats passed 1,000 major rules, each costing our economy $100 million, and Congress didn't vote on a single one of them. Right now, probably more so than at any time in the previous 8 or 10 years or so, the white-hot light of accountability is on each and every member of the United States Congress and the United States Senate. And then people of America, the moms and dads, the business owners, the income earners, the people who want to keep their own money that they've worked hard for in their own pockets, those people are depending on those legislators in Washington, D.C. to finally, once and for all, in terms of financial, fiscal accountability and tax policy, to do right by the American people and start cutting our taxes. Because it's about time we use our own money to start growing our economy, because our businesses depend on it. The ability for parents to put food on the table for their kids and buy school supplies and get them into schools depends on it. We need it more than ever. And this isn't just something that the American people realize. Academics understand this. That's why Milton Friedman, a Nobel Prize-winning economist, he even said that he is for cutting taxes under almost any circumstance whatsoever, because it is vitally important that people have their own money to feed and grow their own economy. And so I am pleased and happy to support an issue like this, because the financial prosperity of our nation literally depends on whether or not we have people in office who understand the value in keeping our money in our economy so our economy grows rather than the government. Thank you all very much for your time and for putting up through this cold weather. The cause is worth it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Representative Curtman. Okay, Phil Willer's going to come up here and give us some closing remarks in just a minute. But before that, last but not least, we're going to wrap up with we kick this off with Rick Pogue. We're going to wrap up with another great small business person here in the county of St. Charles, and Debbie McReynolds has been a real inspiration to me for Debbie McFarland. I'm a little chilly at this point. Debbie McFarland has been a real inspiration to me every time I hear her speak. She's been a real inspiration to this community. She's emblematic of the small business voice, of people that have dreams and they pursue those dreams, and they make those dreams a reality. So we're going to wrap up with one of the voices that this is all about, the whole reason that we're all here today, and we're going to be heading out next to Wichita, Kansas, on to Denver, Colorado, and down to Phoenix, Arizona, where it's a little bit warmer. And so without further ado, my very good friend, Debbie McFarland.
Thank you. I'm not a politician. As Tim said, I'm a very small business owner. It's just me. But first I want to say I'm thankful to be able to stand under the flag. I'm thankful to be an American and to live in the land of the free due to the sacrifice of the brave. I'm an interior designer and general contractor, and I've been in the design business for about 30 years. But a few years ago, my career took a different path. Many of you knew my brother, Jeff Hansen. He was the owner of Hansen's Tree Service. And we lost him in a plane crash in June of 2015. And the only way that I knew how to deal with that loss was to go to work. So I went to work demoing my house, and I took out walls and I tore up stuff, and then I put it back together. And after I did that, a few of my friends saw what could be done. They hired me to do their house, and so I've been tearing up houses and putting them back together for the last couple of years. And so in addition to an interior designer, I became a general contractor. So I'm just a one-person business, but I employ lots and lots and lots of guys. A couple of my guys are here today. And I was just thinking about this in relation to what I do. I would love to demo the tax code that we all are living under. I'd love to tear it up, knock it down, and rebuild it into something that we can all live with and have more money in our pockets to give back to our communities, to put back into our business. You know, I was thinking about this. I shared this with Rick last week. You know, God only asked for 10%. The government is taking 50% of everything I make. They take it. They don't ask me. They just take it. So I would like to see a tax cut for me, for my small business, and so that we can hire more people. A lot of the small businesses need to buy more equipment, and I would like to just see this done. And obviously I'm not a politician and I'm not a smooth talker, so bear with me. But you know, I hate that the government takes the money that I earn, and I'm in 100% favor of demoing the tax code and building it back to something that we can all live with. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. You know, she may not be a professional speaker, but she's got vision. And demoing the tax code and rebuilding it that's something that is better for America is the best thing I've heard today yet. So let's give her a big hand. Thank you, Debbie. Thank you so much. All right, before I bring Phil back up here to close out, we're on time. Can you believe it? So we heard from all those politicians. Thank you for coming out here today on a nice, crisp November, Missouri morning. I appreciate it. There's a ton of stuff behind me. Some of you might want to put on 10 or 12 of these T-shirts because you're so cold. There's T-shirts, there's pens, there's signs. More importantly, there's information on what you can do next. As we are standing here in the heartland, up in Washington, D.C., they are literally deciding how much or how much less of our money they're going to continue to take to fund the swamp instead of draining it. You can call your congressmen and women this week. Do that. Your senators, their staffers, let them hear from you. Tell your neighbors to do the same thing. This bill is going to be introduced and voted on this very week. And as we heard from our speakers, it could be done by Thanksgiving. It'll be the only significant thing Congress has done this year, but it'll be pivotal and monumental for America and for all of our futures. Thank you for being out here today and joining the Tax Cuts Now tour. I'm going to have Phil Willard come back and give you some parting words and how you can help the Job Creators Network and their overall mission of making America greater again.
Again, just want to thank each and every one of you for coming out today and joining the Tax Cuts Now tour. on this wonderfully cool day in Missouri. I'm a Texan, so yes, it's cold to me. But you may be asking what you can do to help. So again, just to reiterate, go to our Tax Cuts Now website, taxcutsnow.com, and sign our petition. I think we have between 160 and 170,000 signatures is what I saw this morning. Contact your U.S. senators, U.S. representatives, and tell them to get on board. If we the people stand up and let our voices be heard, it's not the government's money, it's our money. And tell them we the people want to hold them accountable. And if they want to keep their jobs, they need to take and get on board, and let's do tax cuts. And let's do tax cuts now. What a great Christmas present to small business owners across this country if we could get this tax cuts done this year and make it retroactive to January 1st, 2017. I can't think of a better Christmas present to the small businesses across the country and to the people that work for them, because they could see higher wages, more people could be hired, businesses would expand. That would get this economy rocking and rolling. What a great thing that would happen for this country. We would see GDP in levels we haven't seen in a long time. So again, taxcutsnow.com, sign the petition, contact your U.S. representative, U.S. senators, and again, thanks for coming out today. We really appreciate it. We appreciate your support. I think Stephen wants to say a quick word too.
Hey, thanks again, everybody. It doesn't get more grassroots than coming out and however cold it is right now and standing around here. Just a few house cleaning items. We're like we said, we're going all the way to Arizona this week, and we're going to be producing videos all along the way. That's why we have a whole truck full of equipment. And so follow us on social media, Job Creators Network. Follow them on Facebook, repost their videos, share it. We can see that heat map across the country on social media on who's following and sharing. And I'll tell you, we've had 250,000 people watch some of our videos. And so we encourage you to share it, preach the